There's a path at Avebury that most visitors never find. It's called West Kennet Avenue, and it stretches for over a mile across open farmland lined on both sides by ancient standing stones. Some of the stones are massive, 3 times as tall as a person, and others are smaller, weathered, leaning slightly after 4,000 years of wind and rain. When you walk through this corridor, something happens to your thinking. The steady rhythm of your steps, the wide sky overhead, the stones marking your passage on either side. Your mind stops spinning and starts settling. Questions you've been carrying for months suddenly feel simpler. The thing you've been avoiding becomes the thing you're ready to face. I've watched it happen dozens of times. A pilgrim steps onto that path, unsure, tangled in options, caught between 2 different directions. And somewhere along the way, between the ancient stones and the open horizon, they find their answer. That's the threshold we're naming today, the moment of balance, the moment when you stop drifting and consciously decide what stays and what ends. You're listening to the Holy Rebels podcast, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Mystics. I'm Nina Hirlaender, Franciscan sister, spiritual director, and founder of Dancing Spirit Tours. If you're a spiritual seeker or a mystic in the making, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome to episode 2 of our 8-part series, The Soul's 8 Thresholds of Transformation. We're walking through the Celtic Wheel of the Year as a map for inner change, and we're pairing each threshold with a sacred site from the Celtic Shamanism in England pilgrimage. And we're pairing that threshold with a mystic who lives the example of what the land awakens. Last week, we explored Imbolc, the threshold of first stirrings, the quiet recognition that something new is asking for your attention, even when nothing on the surface has changed yet. Today, we move to the second threshold, the Spring Equinox, and this one is about something that many of us avoid for as long as possible. The act of choosing, of deciding what ends, and of stepping out of the maybe and into a place of clarity. A quick reminder before we go further. This year is the final time that I'm leading the Celtic Shamanism pilgrimage in England. After 15 years of guiding pilgrims through these sacred landscapes, this is the last. So these episodes are my way of celebrating everything that we've experienced together on the land. The sacred sites that have shaped so many lives. The moments of breakthrough that still take my breath away when I think about them. And I'll tell you a secret. This ending is making room for something new. I can't say more yet, but the wheel keeps turning, and Dancing Spirit Tours is turning with it. For now, though, I want to honor England. I want to bring you with me one more time before this chapter closes. Okay, so here's what you'll get in today's episode. 1 inner threshold of transformation, 1 story from England, and 1 practical practice that you can use to move from indecision into grounded clarity. And here's the question that I want you to hold as we begin. Ask yourself, what is the ending I already know that I need to choose, but I keep hoping will choose itself? So let's name the threshold, which is our theme of this episode. It's the Spring Equinox, which falls around March 20 or 21st in the Northern Hemisphere. It's the moment when day and night stand in equal measure. We have 12 hours of light and 12 hours of dark. The world pauses in perfect balance before tipping fully into the growing season. In nature, this is the hinge point. Winter is behind. Spring is ahead. And for one brief moment, everything hangs in equilibrium. The earth is poised between what was and what will be. On the inner spiritual level, this is the threshold of choice. The moment when you stop drifting between options and consciously decide what stays and what goes. It's the threshold of chosen endings and chosen beginnings. Here's how you know you're standing at this threshold in your life. Maybe you feel torn between two directions, two jobs, two relationships, two versions of you. You see merit in both paths, and that's exactly what makes the choice feel so difficult. You keep weighing options without acting. You make pros and cons list. You talk to friends. You journal about it, you pray about it, and still you remain in the maybe. Your body feels pulled in opposite directions. There's a split feeling in your chest, a tightness when you imagine choosing, and a strange exhaustion that comes from holding two possibilities at once. And underneath it all, you want permission to decide. You want somebody to say it's okay to choose, even if you can't be certain. If this sounds familiar, you're standing at the equinox threshold. Now, there are two ways I typically see people get stuck when they're in this season of change, and I'll name them both. And as I do, imagine these for yourself and see if you can relate. The first pattern where people get stuck is waiting for absolute certainty before choosing. You tell yourself that if you just gather more information, talk to one more person, wait a little longer, the right answer will become obvious. And sometimes that's true, but often the waiting becomes its own kind of choice. A choice to stay in limbo. A choice to let circumstances decide for you instead of deciding for yourself. The truth is, most significant decisions don't come with certainty. They come with discernment, which is something different. Discernment feels like a quiet knowing in the body that one direction leads you toward life, even when your mind is still debating. It feels like a subtle settling when you imagine one path, and a subtle constriction when you imagine the other. It feels like a sense of, yes, this is the right thing, that you can't fully explain or justify with logic. Discernment doesn't give you certainty because certainty would bypass your growth. If you knew for sure, you wouldn't need courage. You wouldn't need trust. You wouldn't need to develop the spiritual muscle of acting on faith. Discernment invites you into a different kind of confidence. The confidence that comes from alignment with your deepest self, even when you can't see the whole road ahead. The second pattern that people get stuck in if they're standing at this threshold of their inner equinox is trying to please everyone instead of choosing what feels true for them. Is this you? Do you stay in maybe because maybe doesn't disappoint anyone? maybe feels like a safe choice. You haven't said no to the job offer, so that door stays open. You haven't ended the relationship, so you don't have to face the grief. You haven't committed to one path, so you don't have to let the other path go. This looks like it keeps your options open, but sometimes it's actually a way of avoiding the weight of your own choice. Because choosing means owning, and owning means accepting that some things will end because you decided they would end. And that's a consequence. Here's what I want you to understand about this pattern. The fear underneath it is usually the fear of responsibility, the fear of getting it wrong, the fear that if you choose and it doesn't work out, you will have no one to blame but yourself. But here's what that fear doesn't tell you. Staying in maybe energy is costing you something precious. It's costing you your sense of personal integrity. Maybe you know what you need to do and you keep avoiding it. Well, a part of you registers that avoidance. You start to see yourself as someone who doesn't follow through, someone who can't be trusted to make hard calls, someone who waits for life to decide instead of deciding for yourself. And that erosion of self-trust is far more costly than any temporary discomfort of choosing. If you can relate to this, just know that the gift that awaits you on the other side of this threshold is freedom. A grounded decision that clears the fog. Energy that was bound up in weighing and wondering suddenly becomes available for living. The relief of finally knowing where you stand. That's freeing to imagine, isn't it? Now, let me take you to today's sacred site in England, Avebury. Avebury is the largest stone circle in the world. It's so big that an entire village sits inside of it. Thatched cottages and a 16th century pub nestled among standing stones that have been here for 4,000 years. You can walk through the stones, you can touch them, sit with them. There are no ropes, no barriers. Just ancient stone and open sky and the sound of sheep grazing in the fields. When you first arrive, there's a strangeness to it. The stones are huge, some of them weighing over 40 tons. They're rough and weathered, covered in lichen, shaped by millennia of rain and wind. And they're just there, in the middle of a village, next to someone's garden, across from a tea shop. I often imagine what it would be like to live here, to wake up every morning and to know that your ancestors placed them here, aligned these stones with the movements of the sun and the moon, created this vast sacred architecture that you inherited. The stones are a reminder that the ordinary and the sacred are woven together. And that's still true when you visit today. You're walking on grass that's been walked on for 4,000 years. You're touching stones that human hands shaped and placed before the pyramids were built. Time collapses, and something in you remembers that your life, too, is part of a much longer story. Just outside the main circle is a place called the West Kennet Avenue, and it's a ceremonial processional path that stretches for over a mile across the landscape. Standing stones line both sides of this corridor, placed there by Neolithic people as a path to something sacred. You can walk in between these two rows of stones. We walk this path in the late afternoon, when the light is golden and the shadows are long. The group spreads out naturally. Some pilgrims walk in pairs, talking quietly. Others walk alone, lost in thought. The pace is unhurried, just the path, the field, the stones, the wide Wiltshire sky. And almost always, there's a group of cows waiting to meet us. They graze right among the stones, completely unbothered by the ancient monuments or us pilgrims passing through. I remember one pilgrim, Allison, who walked beside me for part of that corridor. She was in her early 50s, successful in her career as an insurance consultant, well respected in her field. But she'd been carrying a decision for almost a year. Her daughter had a small cooking show on social media, just a hobby at first. But it had grown, and a network had approached them about developing it into something bigger, and they wanted Allison involved. And Allison wanted it too. She could feel it, the aliveness when she talked about it, the way her voice changed when she described the recipes that they were developing, working as mother and daughter, the stories they wanted to tell. But the problem is, she also had this thriving career, a good salary, a reputation, a pension. The sensible path was clear. But the path that called her was anything but clear. Allison had been sitting in this maybe for months, researching, planning, running numbers, talking to financial advisors, and still she was unable to choose. As we walked the avenue that afternoon, something shifted. Maybe it was the rhythm of the walking, maybe it was the openness of the landscape, or the 4,000 years of human beings walking that same path, facing their own thresholds. Allison said, "I think I've known for a while. I just didn't want to be the one to end it." She meant her insurance career. She meant the identity that she'd built up over 25 years. She meant the security that came with staying. And then she turned to me with tears in her eyes and she said something I'd never forgotten. She said, "I kept waiting for it to become obvious. But I think I was really waiting for someone else to make it obvious for me, so that I wouldn't have to be the one responsible for this choice." This is the Spring Equinox threshold. The recognition that some endings will only happen if you choose them. That waiting for certainty is sometimes a way of avoiding responsibility. That the path forward requires you to decide, even when deciding means grief. Even when deciding means letting something go that mattered and stepping into the unknown. Allison walked out of that corridor with her decision made. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know if the cooking show would succeed, but she knew she was done waiting. She knew it was time to choose. This is what happens on pilgrimage. It's the magic of a sacred journey. Something about walking among stones that have stood for 4,000 years changes your relationship to time. Your problems, which feel so urgent and complicated, suddenly appear in a longer perspective. You realize that humans have been facing thresholds like yours since the beginning. That choosing and letting go and beginning again is part of your human inheritance. And that perspective gives you courage. Because if countless people before you have stood at the crossroads and found the strength to choose, so can you. The curriculum that we've built for the Celtic shamanism journey is designed to support exactly this kind of transformation. The sites are not random. They're sequenced to move you through a process. And the teachings that I share along the way give you the framework for understanding what's happening inside you. Time and time again, I've watched hesitant ideas turn into clear decisions that people carry home and actually act on. The combination of the land and the walking, the teachings and the community creates a container where clarity becomes possible, where the thing you've been circling finally comes into focus. If you're feeling pulled to join us on the final Celtic shamanism pilgrimage, the dates are May 23 to June 2nd, 2026. This is the last time we'll ever run this journey. The link is in the show notes. Okay, now let's talk about what happens in the body at this spring equinox threshold. By the time you're standing at a moment of discernment, your body has already been giving you information, often for a long time. The question is whether you've been listening. I talk so often about physical sensations because your body knows the truth much faster than the mind does. Your body responds to reality before your thoughts have a chance to negotiate, to justify, or to talk you out of whatever you're feeling. And that's why paying attention to the body is often the clearest compass that you have. So let me name some of the sensations that you might notice when you're standing at this spring equinox threshold. Sometimes there's a physical sensation in the chest like two magnets pulling in opposite directions. This is the felt sense of what it means to be genuinely torn. There's sometimes a tightness in the belly when you think about choosing. The body is bracing because it knows that choosing means change, and change activates the nervous system. There's tension behind the eyes, which is the physical signature of overthinking. Your mind is running the same loops over and over, trying to find certainty through analysis. There's a craving for clean clarity, a longing for someone to just tell you what to do. This is actually your system asking for resolution, asking for the relief of a decision. And there's a particular kind of relief when you imagine a decision being final, when you picture yourself having already chosen, and you notice your shoulders dropping and your breath deepening. That relief is data. It's telling you something about what your deeper self already knows. Discernment can feel physically uncomfortable because your system is leaving ambiguity. Ambiguity, as uncomfortable as it is its own strange comfort. Because you don't have to face loss. You don't have to face consequences. You just stay in potential. Choosing means leaving potential and entering reality. And that transition has an uncomfortable texture. It can feel like grief and relief at the same time. It can feel like weight lifting and weight settling simultaneously. The next right move at this spring equinox threshold is to make the decision that increases interior freedom. What I mean by interior freedom is the capacity to choose what is true and good without being controlled by fear, by what others think, by the need for approval, by the desire to avoid discomfort. It means choosing from your center rather than from your reactivity. Now, let's bring this threshold to the mystics. One of the things I love about bringing the mystics into this work and decoding the Celtic wheel of the year is that the mystics were real people. They're not abstract principles or theoretical frameworks. They're human beings who faced the same thresholds that you face, and they found a way through. When I'm struggling with a decision, I often ask myself, what would Ignatius do? Or what would Teresa say? Or what would Julian say to this? And having that sense of spiritual companionship, that feeling of walking alongside someone who has mastered what I'm learning, that makes the path feel easier. The landscape and the thresholds of the Celtic wheel can sometimes feel too intangible to translate into your actual life. You might think, okay, the spring equinox is about balance and about choice and about moving forward, but what does that actually mean for my Monday morning? Well, the mystics give cosmic patterns a human form. They show you what these thresholds look like when they're lived. The mystic who gives language to this threshold is Ignatius of Loyola. His life is a masterclass in the art of discernment. For those of you who don't know, Ignatius of Loyola was born in 1491 in the Basque region of Spain. He was a soldier, ambitious and vain, obsessed with glory and status. He loved fine clothes and romantic conquests and the admiration of important people. And then a cannonball shattered his leg in battle. And during the long months of recovery, bedridden and bored, Ignatius started reading. And the only two books available were the lives of the saints and the life of Christ. But he was so bored that he read them anyway. And as he read, he noticed something curious about his inner life. When he daydreamed about returning to his old pursuits, chasing glory and romance, he felt excited at first. But the excitement faded quickly, leaving him dry and empty. But when he daydreamed about following in the footsteps of the saints and the mystics, living simply, serving God and others, he felt something different. A quiet, steady joy that lasted. An aliveness that didn't fade. This observation became the foundation of Ignatian discernment, the recognition that different paths produce different interior effects, and that you can learn to read those effects as guidance. Well, Ignatius went on to found the Jesuits, one of the most influential religious orders in history. But his lasting gift to spiritual seekers, his gift to you, is his teaching on discernment. How to make decisions that align with your deepest desires, which, it turns out, are also God's deepest desires for you. They're one and the same. There's a beautiful connection between Ignatius's teachings and what the land evokes at Avebury. The West Kennet Avenue is a corridor. It asks you to walk forward instead of circling. The stones mark your passage. They say, you are moving. You are progressing. This is not a loop. The landscape itself teaches directed movement. And that's exactly what Ignatius teaches about the soul's growth. That life moves through seasons, that we're always being invited forward into greater freedom, greater love, greater alignment with what is most true. The spring equinox, both in nature and in your soul, is a pivot point. A point of balance that tips into momentum. Ignatius gives this lesson form by teaching that discernment is choosing what most leads you into life, into love, into a sense of freedom, into becoming who you're meant to be. The question is not which option is perfect or which option guarantees success. The question is, which option leads me more deeply into what matters most? He uses a phrase that can sound strange at first. He says, strive for holy indifference. Holy indifference. Now, that doesn't mean not caring. It means something much more radical. Holy indifference is the inner freedom that comes when you've loosened your grip on specific outcomes. It's the capacity to say, I have preferences, I have hopes, I have fears, and I'm willing to set all of that aside so I can actually hear what's deep and true inside me. And that's how you get to discernment. Think about what blocks clear decision-making. It's things like fear of loss, fear of what others will think, attachment to comfort, attachment to a certain image of yourself, the need for approval, the need to avoid conflict. All of these fears and needs create static. They distort your intuition. They make it hard to hear the quiet voice of your deeper knowing. Holy indifference is like turning down the volume on all that static. It's creating a clear inner space where truth can be heard. It doesn't mean you stop caring about the outcome. It means you care more about alignment than you care about control. This is incredibly practical for you, my friend. Because when you stay in maybe, because it feels safer than ending something, that's not discernment. That's avoidance wearing the costume of wisdom. True discernment leads to action, even imperfect action. When you try to make everyone happy so that you don't risk being rejected or left out, you end up making decisions based on other people's reactions instead of your own integrity. You become a mirror instead of a person. You shape-shift to fit what you think others want, and in the process, you lose contact with who you are. When you confuse anxiety with intuition, you can mistake fear for guidance. Anxiety says something bad will happen if you choose. Intuition says, this is the path towards love, even though it's hard. Do you see the difference? Ignatius says to pay attention to what brings consolation over time. Consolation, in the Ignatian sense of the word, is deep and lasting peace. A sense of being drawn towards an increase in hope, faith, and love. It's different from temporary relief or excitement because it's settling. There's a quiet yes. The discernment move at this threshold is to choose the path that brings peace, that brings consolation and steadiness over time. This means you might need to sit with a decision for a few days and notice the quality of your inner life as you imagine each option. Which one leaves you with more inner freedom? Which one leaves you more yourself? Which one increases your capacity for love? Choose what most leads you into life, and let the ending be clean. Okay, now here's your practice for today. This is designed for the Spring Equinox threshold. And remember, we're not talking about the literal season outside your window. We're talking about your inner season. If you're standing at a moment of discernment, if you're weighing options, if you're feeling the pull between two directions, this is your equinox, regardless of what month it is. This practice brings balance and decision without force. It's a 5-minute discernment scan that you can do right now or before you go to bed tonight. Step 1. Write down the 2 options you're weighing. Label them A and B. Keep it simple, just a few words for each. Step 2. Close your eyes and imagine yourself having chosen option A. You've made the decision. You're living in that reality. Notice what happens in your body. Does your chest tighten or open? Does your belly settle or agitate? Does your breathing deepen or is it shallow? Just notice, no judgment. Now, imagine having chosen option B. Same process. You've made the decision. You're living in that reality. Notice the body as you imagine having chosen option B. Is there tightness? Is there opening? Settling, agitation? Just observe. Now ask yourself this question. Which of the 2 options increases love and inner freedom? Which of the 2 options increases love and inner freedom in me? Notice what arises. Now, ask yourself this question. Which of the 2 options is driven most by fear or by the need for approval? Be honest with yourself. What would you choose if you were not afraid? What would you choose if you did not need anyone's permission? If you weren't worried about what other people will think or say? And the last step is to choose one concrete next action that moves you towards the freer option. This doesn't have to be the final commitment. It's just the next step. One email, one conversation, one boundary, one declaration, even if only to yourself, and then notice how you feel. Your reflection prompt for this week, for this exercise, is: if I trusted God to handle the details, what would I choose? If I trusted God to handle the details, what would I choose? One of the things that I've learned about building a relationship with God is that God speaks through your freedom. When you're tangled up in fear and approval seeking and avoidance, it's hard to hear anything clearly. Often we look for signs and synchronicities to guide us. We want the universe to send a clear message, a song on the radio, or a number that keeps appearing. And sometimes those things are meaningful. But more often, searching for signs becomes another way of waiting for something outside of yourself to make the decision for you. When you become still, when you're willing to let go of the burdens that are not yours to carry, guidance arrives, and it arrives from within, from the quiet knowing that has been there all along, waiting for you to stop looking elsewhere. What is the ending you already know you need to choose, but you keep hoping will choose itself? Discernment is the courage to choose what brings you into deeper freedom, even when you can't guarantee the outcome. I've had my own seasons of sitting in the maybe, staying in situations that looked responsible from the outside, but were actually avoidance on the inside. I told myself I was being prudent. I told myself I was gathering information. I told myself I was waiting for clarity, but the truth was, I knew. I knew what needed to end. I just didn't want to be the one to end it. When I finally made a clean choice, I felt grief and relief at the same time. And I realized that peace doesn't come from perfect information. It comes from integrity, from aligning your actions with what you know to be true deep down. That's what the archetypal Spring Equinox offers. Balance that tips into movement. Discernment that becomes a decision. The courage to choose an ending so that a new beginning has room to grow. Today we entered the Spring Equinox threshold. Balance, discernment, the courage to choose what ends instead of drifting. And we walked the West Kennet Avenue at Avebury, and we practiced a quick discernment scan to help you sense which path brings real interior freedom. Next week, we're moving into the third threshold on the Celtic wheel of the year, and it is the threshold of Beltane. Beltane is the threshold of vitality, of radiance, the moment when life force returns in full. And it addresses something that many of us carry, which is the experience of feeling depleted and numb and not fully ready to embrace our lives of joy. Don't worry, because next week you'll learn what it means to recover embodied joy, the kind that restores your aliveness from the inside out. I'll take you to one of the most beautiful and unexpected sites on the pilgrimage in England, and we'll work with a mystic who understood that joy is the soul's natural state. This mystic knew that delight is a form of prayer. Before we end, I want to invite you to something special. On February 21st, I'm hosting a free live class called The 8 Seasons of the Soul and How to Know Which One You're In. It's 75 minutes, and by the end of it, you'll know exactly which threshold you're standing on right now and what that season is actually asking of you. I created this class because after 15 years of guiding pilgrims through thresholds, I have noticed something. Most of the exhaustion, confusion, and stuckness I see aren't character flaws at all. They're timing problem. People have not been taught to recognize the season that they're in. Maybe you're trying to bloom in winter. Maybe you're trying to harvest before the fruit is ripe. Maybe you're trying to plant new seeds in soil that hasn't been cleared, and then you wonder why nothing takes root. In this live class, I'm going to give you the map that shows you where you are so you can finally stop forcing and start aligning. By the end of our time together, you'll understand why you felt out of sync and why it's not your fault. And you'll be able to name your current soul season with clarity. This is the framework behind this podcast series that you're listening to, and it's the framework behind the Celtic Shamanism in England pilgrimage. And on February 21st, I'm teaching the whole thing live with time for questions and real interaction. This class is free, so if you've been listening to these episodes and thinking, I need to understand which threshold I'm actually in, this is your moment. Go to the link in the show notes and register, and I'll send you all the details. So here's what I want you to do. Go to the link in the show notes, register for the free class on February 21st, and let's find out together which season your soul is standing in. Now, let me leave you with this. What is your life asking you to decide? And what would it feel like to finally stop waiting for certainty and make a clear choice? This is the second threshold, the Spring Equinox. Discernment becoming decision. My friend, may you trust your capacity to choose. May you find the interior freedom to let something end. May you take one clear step toward what is beginning. And above all, trust the mystic within you.